we are about to get into our discussion zone of the Jiffy. And yes, as I stated, we have a renowned investigative journalist, an award winning investigative journalist, and a staunch anti corrupt crusader. Publishing articles talking about issues of press freedom, issues relating to corruption, issues relating to things of national concern, national discourse that an average Ghanaian wouldn't be in the best position to say because they don't have that platform. But he, because of his caliber, because of his ability, to put it out there and ask questions for the right people in the helms of affair to answer. He is here with us as well, as we're still in our week of talking about press freedom. We marked World Press Freedom Day a couple of days back. So we're very glad to have in our midst today Mr. Manasseh Azure Awune. Hello, sir, and welcome to the Africa Daily Show.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I hope you're doing well.
By God's grace, I am.
Great. So, let me quickly start with this. How did you celebrate the World Press Freedom Day? How did you observe it?
Well, I was part of a ceremony that was held at a press center. There was a flag raising ceremony.
Right.
And we had officials of the government,
okay,
people from UNICEF, and those in the media fraternity coming together to re-emphasize the importance of press freedom to our democracy and our development in general.
Right. Great. To talk about press freedom, we've been hearing this particular, thing over and over again. And one would come to say that are we actually losing, or do we really know the meaning of what press freedom is? So quickly, if you could just, run us through what do we mean by press freedom?
When we talk about press freedom is a subset of the general fundamental human rights that we should have as a people, to be able to say or think or reason in a particular way without being restricted, if only your reasoning, your thinking, your speech does not hurt the peace and stability of the country. So, for instance, if you go on air to incite one ethnic group against the other, that they should harm them like we saw in Rwanda some years ago, that means stepping beyond the limits.
Right.
But generally, you and I should be able to have the opportunity to express our sentiments, whether right or wrong, about the system we live in and all of that. So press freedom generally is an extension of the general freedom we have. All of us have the freedom, but because of the special role the media plays, the media institution is mandated by the Constitution to be a vanguard against any form of arbitrary rule.
Right.
So we have to perhaps hold the government accountable to the people. That's what the Constitution says, that we should hold the government responsible and accountable to the people.
Right.
So the executive, the judiciary, the legislative arms of government, we as journalists or the media are supposed to hold them accountable. And I've come to even realize that when we talk of accountability, it goes beyond those in public offices. If you have a private employer who is abusing the rights of his or her employees, then as a journalist or the media, we are also expected to be the voices for such people whose rights are abused.
Amazing. You mentioned a significant term there that I think I need to ask. You said if it doesn't cause harm. But then again, you may be coming from a good place. Well, the Rwandan case is an exception, but you may be coming from a good place and thinking, okay, this is actually wrong and is affecting people and everything. So let me put this out there. But the one you're actually putting out to address may see that as something, as a threat or, a target or a hit at them. How do you go by this?
Well, that's why they often say press freedom is not absolute. So there are avenues to address such. And the Constitution makes room for or enjoins the media that if I publish something about you that you feel offended, there are a number of avenues. One, you are entitled to a rejoinder. If I say you were at point A at 9 p.m. and you were never there, if it causes you any form of embarrassment, you can issue a rejoinder, and I'm obliged to publish it and give it the same prominence I gave to the first publication. Two, you can go to the National Media Commission for redress, or you can resort to the courts to sue for defamation. So there are a number of avenues that people can, or institutions can take if they feel that a particular publication or broadcast by the media does not represent their interest or harms their interest. Put it that way.
Okay. So would you agree with me that whilst we're still advocating to have that, power to operate freely without, being afraid of being threatened, losing our lives and what have you, would you say that sometimes our publications in terms of the media space are sometimes out of line?
Well, that one, I will agree with you because you cannot get a perfect institution.
Right.
There are a lot of people who set up media houses for different reasons. We now know that a lot of them are owned by politicians, and they go on the show, sometimes the owners, to insult, vilify, malign, and do all manner of terrible things because they have a platform and they are unrestrained. So you have a lot of that going on in this country. And in my view, that in itself is a threat to press freedom, because if press freedom or media freedom is not exercised responsibly, it tends to incite public opinion against the media, and some of it happens a lot in this country.
Okay. Now, what do you think? So, what are some of the mechanisms that you think that can be put in place to actually, curtail some of these acts, which goes a long way to affect, press freedom?
I think the first responsibility lies within the media.
Okay.
Journalists, editors, media owners should value the freedom we have. Because if you don't value it, you misuse it. And if you misuse it, you can lose it.
Right.
So we should be able to sit down and tell ourselves that, look, the Constitution has given us a mandate. It isn't every profession that finds itself or its name in the Constitution of Ghana. It's one of the few professions that you find in the Constitution, which the Constitution protects. So that places a secret responsibility on us.
Okay.
And so the first is to be honest with ourselves and say, look, if we want to be respected, then we have to act well.
Right.
The second is to also put pressure on the government and its agencies and institutions to be able to set up and safeguard the freedom of the media.
Okay.
There is no justification for assaulting or killing a journalist, no matter how irresponsible they are. If we're to apply that same rule, then a lot of politicians should be killed because some of them are more irresponsible than the most irresponsible journalists in this country.
Right.
So what I'm saying is that if we offend anybody, they can go to these three or resort to these three avenues I mentioned, the rejoinder, NMC, or even go to court.
Right.
Nobody has the right to threaten or take the life of a journalist because they do not agree with the content of their publication.
Right.
So we should put pressure on these institutions and also the government to act anytime a journalist comes under such attack or abuse.
Talking about attacks on journalists, which is going to be my next question. Now, there's this, interview you were granted on one of the media houses here, and you talked about threats on journalists are not dealt with. Could you throw more light on that? Do you think it's they don't even look at the case, or they just follow it without any proper investigations, and eventually it goes to waste like that?
Well, because they don't find solutions to them, one is tempted to think that they may be doing that intentionally. I was working with Joy FM, and one of my colleagues, Latif Idris, was assaulted right at the police headquarters when he went to cover incident. And they claimed they didn't know who assaulted him.
Well,
It was in the public, in the open. Were they telling us that if one of these people had killed Latif, he or she was going to walk free because they could not identify that person in broad daylight?
Right.
We know what happened to Ahmed Swale, and nobody has been able to do anything. I have been threatened. I've made reports, and nothing has come out of it. I don't necessarily think that the police in this country are so incompetent so as to be able to find the people behind some of these attacks and killings. So that leaves us with a speculation, which we know that in this country, the state institutions and the public officials often listen to the voice from above, the so-called order from above.
Right.
If the order from above is that pay attention to this and get to the bottom, they will. But if it's the other way, sometimes you don't find anything.
Right.
Because sometimes some robberies happen in the night, in the middle of nowhere. The police are able to trace those who are behind it.
Perpetrators, right.
So we can't have these continuous threats, deaths, and abuse against journalists, and then all the time they draw blank in their investigation.
If this is the case, what's the solution? How do you protect media men? Because if the same people that you're going to may sometimes get others not to really pursue the issue or just let it go, how does one ensure their safety? Who do we go to?
That is the most difficult answer or question I would have to be confronted with because, as you rightly stated,
right,
the very people who are supposed to act or fight for us, we often hear that don't take the law into your own hands.
True.
So if, for instance, somebody threatened Ahmed Swale, Ahmed Swale was killed. Ahmed Swale's family could have attacked the person who threatened their family member.
Right.
Whether or not he was responsible. But we are living in a democracy. We are living in a country that we are supposed to have the rule of law. So they said, don't take the law into your own hands and act. Allow the police to do it. So if the police fails to find the murderers or killers of Ahmed Swale,
right,
the question now is, who can? So that's where we have the problem. So we don't really have much to do unless to insist and also continually call on those who are mandated by the constitution or the laws of the state to act on such matters. Right. We continue to have to call on them to do what is necessary.
Amazing. So at the beginning, you also added that press freedom is not absolute. Now, let's look at a situation. Do we have hope, first of all, in that space that we may actually achieve that absolute in terms of our operations as journalists?
Well, I don't think we need to even have hopes because it is something that is a fact. It cannot be absolute because as we live in this country, we don't only operate based on what happens here. We also sometimes look at best practices all over the world to shape our laws.
Absolutely.
And as far as I'm concerned, press freedom is not absolute in anywhere around the world.
Right.
It is often said that your freedom ends where another person's freedom begins.
True.
So the fact that we have freedom doesn't mean I can go on my Facebook wall or on a media platform and accuse you, insult you, incite hatred against you when there is no basis.
Okay. Right.
To do that. Okay. So we cannot have absolute press freedom.
Absolutely. Now you have been putting out publications. You've written articles talk about issues, challenges facing the nation, from the press freedom matters to national discourse, important national issues, and you've actually written publications, a number of them out there. A lot of people will agree with you. others would not agree with you, backlashing and everything. How do you deal with such things around you in such a space?
It is only natural that some people disagree with some of the things I write
Mm.
because there are some things that I wrote maybe 5 years ago. I don't agree myself now. That I agree with myself then.
Okay.
So at the end of the day, it is only natural that you have some people who disagree with what you write.
Mm.
But how one disagrees is as important as the disagreement itself.
Right.
You can disagree with what I have written, but that does not give you the right to come attacking me, insulting me, maligning me, vilifying me, or inciting hatred against me.
Right.
Just because you do not agree with the content of my publication.
Okay.
So it's very difficult when it comes to those who come purposely to attack and not even deal with the issues you have raised.
Right. Okay, thank you. We're still talking to a renowned, award-winning investigative journalist, and of course, like I said, a staunch anti-corruption crusader, Manasseh Azure, Awuni, right here on the Africa Daily Show. My colleague Hafiz Gunu is right here. I believe he has some questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up with Epiphania so we can move on. Hafiz.
Mr. Manasseh, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Good. I have two questions actually, but let me lead with this. What, in your opinion, is the biggest threat to press freedom on the continent?
On the continent?
Yes, of Africa.
Or in a country?
On the continent, Africa, yeah.
I think the biggest threat to press freedom is corruption. Because that is the biggest problem facing Africa.
Okay.
And while there is corruption, journalists will be prepared to or must report on them. And people who engage in corruption, former President Mahama said corruption was mass murder. And sometimes if you look at the transactions people get themselves into, the kind of deals they cut, they can easily kill. So once there's corruption, the journalists become an enemy to the corrupt. And in this case, the corruption or the most corrupt institution is often the government in Africa. Wow. So it sets journalists on a collision course with the government, which eventually creates a lot of problems.
Okay.
So for me, corruption as a subset of bad governance is one of the biggest threats.
Okay. Thank you very much.
If there's transparency and all of that, the work of the journalist is quite easy and safe.
I see. Nice. But quickly, my last question before you take leave. I want to understand. I want to come to you personally. I mean, given the publications you've put out over the years. I mean, young journalists like ourselves. I mean, we have followed your career closely enough. I mean, we've seen the publications, and the recent one that comes to mind is the expose on contracts and everything. Now, I want to understand. Give us an example of a hostile reception that was accorded you, one that you can directly, link to a journalistic piece you put out.
Well, I've had a number of them, but I can mention the castle story I did about this former bodyguard of President Akufo-Addo who was training some young people there, whose motto was vigilance and protection, and they were being trained by old or retired soldiers, and who said they were doing security training, but they had no license to do that.
Yeah, I remember.
I think it is, one of the most hostile receptions I've got. And part of it was death threats. I also got some hostile reception in previous works, Jida Sada. Even quite recently, you find one, I don't know whether to call him a journalist or whatever, sitting on primetime show, insulting me for a story I did about President Mahama in 2016 on the 4th and all of that. So
I think I have an idea.
all of these happen, and it is sad to say that sometimes it isn't only the people, but your old colleagues as journalists.
Mm.
Apart from this confused fellow, the Ghana Journalists Association in 2017 also issued a press statement against the robbing the Assembly's investigation. I did something on the Jospon Group getting a $74 million fraudulent contract.
Yeah.
That contract was eventually cancelled, and the nation saved more than 330 million Ghana cedis. But the Ghana Journalists Association issued a press statement saying it shouldn't destroy profitable local businesses. And I find that very hostile because of where it was coming from. If you have the association that is supposed to protect and fight for the interests of journalists coming up against you to attack you and not stating that, Manasseh, you got this fact wrong or you got this wrong, but the only reason they gave at the time was that I was targeting a private business, which to me was very unfortunate. So there are quite a number of them.
Right.
Oh.
Not to add that every post I put on Facebook, you find people who are affected or angry at one investigation or the other, bringing that anger to my social media handle.
Right. All right. Thank you, Hafiz. Quickly with Epifania, so we can wrap it up. Epi,
Yes.
you're on.
Yes. Thank you so much once again for joining us and making time. I want to ask that what are some of the mechanisms or what systems do you believe we can put in place to actually check corruption? Because we do realize that corruption is more like a bane. It's actually the main thing that is driving everything we find to be wrong. What systems can we put in place so that despite who sits on the seat of power, we can actually hold them accountable?
Well, I would want to mention one thing, and that is leadership. When we get a leader in this country who is serious about fighting corruption, it would trickle down. Corruption cannot be defeated from the bottom-up approach. It has to come from the top-bottom approach. If the head of an organization is not corrupt, he or she can ensure that those under, up to the cleaner, is not corrupt. But if the cleaner, the front desk executive, and the other employees are not corrupt, that top management is corrupt, those down there cannot force it up. So we've spoken a lot about corruption, but once we have leadership deficit in that area, we cannot make any headway.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, we just definitely need to have a leader who would be very accountable to the people. All right, thank you very much, Mr. Manasseh Azure, for joining us on the Africa Daily Show, and really appreciate your time. And we will certainly reach out to you in the future for further interactions.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you. Okay, the show is Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. You are live. We just spoke to multiple award-winning investigative journalist Manasseh Azure Awune right here. And we're still talking press freedom, as it is our theme for the week. 2:34 GMT, very interesting, enlightening. There's a whole lot of, it's very, 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 very revealing for me. And let me bring in my colleague so we can have our own in-house conversation right here, and we can proceed from there. Guys,
Yeah.
how far?
Good.
Yeah, so press freedom, it's actually cannot be absolute. This is not a Ghanaian, thing, but a worldwide thing that
Yeah, absolutely,
obviously
absolutely. I
you
mean,
can never get it.
That's is something that we've always known. Of course, absolution would mean you'd have all kinds of characters doing,
And people
whatever
even
it is
going
they
out
want.
of
Yes,
line,
because
right?
exactly, because in every space you find yourself, you have very bad characters in there that
Absolutely.
would take advantage of the system. So it can be absolute, even
Right.
in the United States or wherever in the
Oh,
Western
yeah.
world you
Oh,
find
yeah.
these situations happening. I think even in the last conversation we had on press freedom, we talked about how some journalists are accosted here and there, and he's mentioned a few. And I think even in the Ghana case, the name Ameswale keeps
Oh
coming up.
yeah.
Yes, on the world stage, we've heard of names such as Mahmoud
Khashoggi.
Hussein, Khashoggi,
Mm-hmm.
and even this guy, the one in
Egypt.
Britain's version of Guantanamo Bay. Is it Bamish? What's his name? Julian Assange.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
Haven't- not
WikiLeaks, the
familiar with
co-founder
that.
of WikiLeaks.
Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
and so all these situations. So we've seen that
Mm.
what journalists are faced with.
Mm.
Now I asked him the second part of the conversation was for me the question that I asked was to find out what he's had to deal with. I mean he's one I'm sure any young journalist. The
Oh
name,
no! Oh, the name.
his name rings a bell.
Yeah,
Yes,
Azure,
and
right.
if you follow his social media activity and everything, I mean, there are times. I mean, most of the time he puts out stories, and you find everyone in the country
Talking
about
yeah.
it. No one will
Either
shut up about
bashing
it.
or supporting.
Exactly. There's a lot of opinion. I mean, and
Exactly.
he's put out so many pieces over the years. So you think that I mean. Over the years, he stepped on a few powerful tools, in the line of duty. So he's going to have a target on his back,
Right.
in some instances. So I was just trying to understand how he, how he's, some of the examples of the things he's had to deal with.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure for some of us, I mean, after one or two threats, you're done. You're
Oh
like,
yeah.
hey,
Yeah. I mean,
you know,
because he said it threats on his life. You know.
not even but from personalities that have been implicated in his pieces, but
No.
from fellow
He did-
journalists.
Yeah.
and-
Exactly.
Yes,
you
and
know?
he mentioned certain
Yeah. Not to put it on record.
yes, he insinuated in a way, making reference to some journalists. I think I have an idea of particular journalists he talked about. But anyway, so it was quite interesting to get into his head, try to see just how
Right.
how he's been able to deal with this whole uncomfortable or toxic situation that
Environment.
comes with his line of work anyway. But
All right. I
He'll be
believe
fine.
every journalist. I think so. I asked myself one time. So if you are involved in such a dangerous, way of more of like occupation or line of duty and everything, couldn't you have gone the Anas way? Even though people are saying they know the face of Anas, maybe you could have just gone, anonymous with your face mask.
and
or
the cover
disguise.
work is even more dangerous. I mean, because I mean, even over certain situations, I would have wanted to
Yeah.
find out but I didn't want to make the interview about him.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yes,
about
but
the
I
whole
was.
thing,
I
yeah.
mean, I was tempted to ask if, given his line of work. Look, see, I've forgotten the question again anyway, but it will come.
Anyway,
You'll be
Epi,
fine. You'll be fine.
jump in this one. Let's proceed.
I think I'm
Yeah, well.
particularly interested in how to put a stop to the corruption, and so that's why I did ask that question. Cause
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter who sits on the power, short, tall, handsome, ugly, fat, slim. Look, it doesn't matter which party. Once we don't have systems that will get the people and hold them accountable, people would always steal from the state and then move on, and we cannot get them and bring them back.
Effie, what systems?
That's the thing. That's just the question I was about asking,
What
because these are systems that are being, put in place by that leader we are all looking to, be accountable. And do you think that person would hold him responsible?
You see, that's what I'm
You know?
thinking. I'm looking at mechanisms. I can't necessarily say A, B, C, but mechanisms that can necessarily hold you accountable, that you, the person in place of power, are not the one responsible for it. That's what I'm saying, despite who sits on power. So you do not necessarily determine.
Okay.
Because in such cases, now, assuming you want to take certain people to court for corrupt handling of the state or something, there are certain cases where you actually need to bring in international organizations in certain instances.
You don't have to.
How
You
would
don't
you?
have
Yeah. How would you do that? So
But
that's like
so
not
so then you see, per the question both of you are asking me now. So if the person in power is responsible for appointing who goes to what, who be the judge of what, are you going to take the same person to go and face trial for these same judges he appointed?
Effie, look, you need to understand something. You see, we have laws. And,
Absolutely.
I mean, countless number of occasions we've talked about how we have very good laws.
Oh, beautiful.
And
But we've
how do we
always-
see them
well,
They've
definitely.
always
unfolding?
struggled to implement, okay, to make the laws bite. Because at the end of the day, you see, laws without implementation is just an advice.
Exactly.
That's all it is. And I
Either
think
you take it or you leave it.
that's all it is.
So then
It
what?
doesn't bite.
So then what is happening with the implementation of these laws? Since
Uh,
we don't want the advice, we actually want to see
you
the
see,
laws enacted.
and you see with the submission that he made, he talked about corruption on a number of occasions. Even in
Yeah.
the first part of my question, I asked him the biggest threat. He talked about corruption.
Right.
And you see, the thing with corruption is it's a complex situation.
Mm.
It's very complex, and you have a lot of beneficiaries in a long chain of whatever corrupt act you uncover. Okay, so and what it means is that you would have to drag a number of issues.
Yeah.
Bring in a lot of top guns, bring them down if that is, and at the risk of your own life sometimes. So at the end of the day, it takes someone with a certain level of will to want to see it to the end.
A pessimist, huh?
An optimist, rather.
An optimist rather.
So
Go too far with the
yes,
whole thing.
to want to see it. And you see, when you are into a system that is very beneficial to you, okay, once you are in a system that harms you, and you get out of it, you lose every incentive to want to solve the problem. Now, for instance, you and I, we walk home all the time and we talk about the traffic situation. Now, if for some reason you become an appointee, a government appointee, and somehow you've been made a minister, and some of these rules or these inconveniences no longer apply. A lot of the time, the incentive to actually solve that problem, for most people, it naturally goes because it doesn't affect him personally.
Right.
I don't know if you get me. So, where is that coming from? And you talk about even corruption. When you talk about corruption, a lot of them even accuse the people of being corrupt. Recently, we have a hashtag that is trending, Fix the Country. And you have some
The
appointees
counter.
turn around and
Yeah.
trivialize the whole issue. Some even turn around and tell us to fix ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
Later on, apologizing after doing that damage.
so it's a lot.
You know.
I get how complex corruption is, but he made mention. I believe it boils down to the integrity of an individual's attitude because, like you mentioned, there's a whole chain of people benefiting. If all those people were diligent and were holding on to integrity, do you think if I come and bribe you and you stand against it or it's against your principles or code, would you accept it?
And well,
No, I just want to find, would you accept it, Hafiz? If
I'm
it's
not on
against your
trial yet.
principles. I'm just asking, would you accept it?
guy is not on trial.
No, but if he wouldn't accept it and I go elsewhere, so if
know-
I keep going to everybody and they keep turning it down based on their principle, how do I get a way in to start a chain? Somebody has to allow me in.
right.
Somebody has to be able to say, I like this, I'm going to do with it. So as much as we say, oh, it's complex, it's always complex, but sometimes it's the barest simple thing that breaks it down. If we're diligent in the littlest of things, I'm not doing this because it's wrong. I've gotten this contract. I want to see to it that it's done properly. I want to make sure that the people doing it are doing a good job of it. It's always about going to the end of the road.
Anyway, well, the part that actually got me scared was actually, going with a story, publishing something that actually saved the country, some amount of money and everything. And then you get that organization, that association that he said, the Journalists Association, also bashing him for doing that. So it's kind of like there's that part where you don't get the support, that backing. Because this is a case where the journalist associations are supposed to be the ones championing such causes, championing transparency, and championing the case where government or people in the realms of affair are held accountable. And this is the case, the same people are not actually spelling out some of the things that you did that may have, led you to do something or publish something wrong. But actually, going behind your back and looking at you from a distance, not stopping there, but other journalists as well in the same realms.
Look at how journalism is done in this country. Or not, most part. Who owns a lot of the media organizations?
Well,
we are talking about private individuals
absolutely,
that have vested interests.
Mm.
A lot of individuals that own media houses, you can easily trace what political party they are affiliated to. We see it in the open. We see it. So some even set up and they make it as part
obvious.
of their their
It's
mission
too
statement.
obvious.
Is there?
And
It's not something that is hidden.
and
Others would operate in a more surreptitious manner.
yeah, trying to be neutral.
Try to.
But sometimes they
quote
just
unquote,
cannot put
you
a.
just can see it.
Yeah.
You just can see it.
But is that supposed to
In
be
their
the case?
posturing.
Is that supposed to be the case?
Well, you do what your paymasters tell you to do. So Unless, of course,
Wow.
you want to be more assertive and independent, then you go
Mm.
on a solo path. But other than that, if you are going to be operating under a certain management
Yeah,
that is leaning towards a
you need to
particular
abide, eh?
government,
Follow the rules.
or exactly, they would have certain situations or
Mm.
certain instances that
Mm.
they would need you to follow to whip you in line. And well,
I was just reading this article, and there's this, a classification of media houses and who they belong to and everything. So there's this CNN. It came under Democrats, and Fox came under
exactly, even
Republicans.
in the advanced world, you see it.
So Fox
Yeah.
for the Republicans, and then CNN for the Democrats. Soviet and all of that. So, well, it's a tough spot,
It's not.
isn't
Even the
it?
BBC. Look, even in their interviews,
No, I'm just saying, it's a tough
you
spot
can
for
catch it.
it's
You
a
can
tough
catch it.
spot for
Yeah.
for that individual who tries to be neutiral and try to say it
Then
as it's
become a
supposed to be
blogger.
said.
I mean, there's social media now.
That's what they call themselves now.
So,
Well,
go
yeah,
into blogging and everything. Then
very
you, with your phone and whatever gadget
interesting.
you have,
Right,
you can
right.
write whatever it is
Mm,
you want.
mm,
But so long as you are signed on to, say, traditional media space, a
mm,
lot of the time what you put out there is vetted thoroughly, and if it
mm,
doesn't align with quote their editorial policy,
mhm.
then whatever that is. So a lot of the time, it's more lenient to a particular government. So uh, based on that, they either let one publication fly or not.
All right.
Yes, so we see it every now and then. But
Okay.
as to whether press freedom is going to be absolute, no,
It can never happen. Yes. Well, Manasseh spoke on that, and I believe other renowned journalists worldwide would also be on the same line of conversation. Thank you, Hafiz. Epi, any final words?
I think what I have to say is what I've said. I mean, if we don't look at what we stand for, we'll fall for everything. It's not complex like
Mm,
that. It's
mm.
about the people.
Okay.
All these organizations are made up of people. The very journalists, we are individuals before we become journalists. Let's not forget, as much as we enter certain professions and carry on the ethics of it, we come with our own mindset, our own nature. And if we're not doing the right things or we don't live by the right principles, it doesn't matter what coat or what van we come in or what profession we come in, we'll still end up doing the wrong things.
All right, thank you. The show was Africa Daily on Africa Global Radio. If you missed the discussion zone, trust me, it will be made available on our YouTube page. All you need to do is subscribe, Africa Global Radio, or listen on demand on africaglobalradio.com or via VMO. If you are a Vodafone subscriber, if you're not, please get a SIM card and get connected, because, yes, you get every day Africa Daily Show. All you need to do is dial 321, follow the voice prompt, and there you have it.